Hello, my name is Joel Menninga. I'm going to talk today on a topic that I've always found pretty interesting, and that is the incredible speed of change in the world of computers. I'll start by talking about a computer that was called ENIAC. Now, ENIAC is considered the world's first all-purpose computer. It was built for the United States Army during World War II. They built it in a basement room at the University of Pennsylvania. It took up 1,500 square feet. It weighed over 27 tons, and it took 174,000 watts of electricity to run it. It was rather large. Now, ENIAC had inside of it 17,468 vacuum tubes. If you're not familiar with vacuum tubes, they have a limited lifespan. They can burn out the same way a light bulb does. So while ENIAC was running, it averaged around 2 days as a working computer until one of the vacuum tubes burned out, and everything stopped, and they had to find the burnt out tube, replace it, and start over. I think that might be a little frustrating. Well, the next step in computers was transistors. Transistors are smaller, lighter, and far more reliable than the vacuum tubes were. Now, the first fully transistorized computer was called Tradic, and it was built in 1954. Now, this machine is a PDP-8, and that is from 1965. And you can see that in the roughly 20 years between ENIAC and this PDP-8 here, they've gone from a computer the size of an entire house to one that's roughly the size of a refrigerator. Now, a few years later, in 1974, they released the world's first microcomputer. It was the Altair 8800. Now, today, when I think of a microcomputer, I might be thinking of something smaller than that, but nevertheless, this is the world's first microcomputer. Now, if you have an iPhone or a Mac computer, you can thank these two guys. That is Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. And in 1976, in a garage in California, Wozniak and Jobs built the first Apple computer. And yes, the first Apple really did have a case made out of wood. Well, shortly after Apple got into the business of selling computers, IBM decided to jump in the ring. And in 1981, they released the IBM PC. Now, IBM was not two guys in a garage. IBM was a major corporation that already existed in America at the time and was probably one of the largest companies in the computer field. Consequently, the IBM PC really became the workhorse for American business for a good couple of decades. Through the 80s and the 90s, any office in the country would have had an IBM PC on every desk. Now, IBM made a mistake when they didn't patent the hardware in their computer. And other companies came along and essentially cloned the PC and made a computer that work just like it and sold it for less money. These were known as IBM PC compatible computers. Well, being that they were less money, as time went by, the PC compatible computers got a larger and larger share of the market, and IBM got a smaller and smaller share of the market until in 2005, IBM threw in the towel and sold what the business it had left to Lenovo. But if you have a computer that runs on Windows today, that computer is its great-great-great-granddaddy. Now, the most obvious thing about these computers that I've been showing you is the physical size. As time's gone by, they've gotten much smaller, but more important than the physical size is computing power. And as these computers have been getting smaller, they've also been getting vastly more powerful. Now, in 1965, a guy named Gordon Moore made a statement, and that statement ended up having some sticking power, and it eventually became known as Moore's Law. Now, I'll paraphrase Moore's Law when I say that the available computing power has a tendency to double every 2 years, and the cost gets cut in half over that same time frame. But if you look at what he actually wrote, you'll notice that he used number of transistors as his unit of measure. Now, if you don't think that doubling every 2 years is amazing, look at it this way. If today you could drive your car safely at 65 miles per hour, and in 2 years you would be driving safely at 125 miles per hour, 4 years from now you would be driving at 250 miles per hour, and 6 years from today you would be driving 500 miles per hour. That's pretty amazing. But that's what computers have done, and they've done it fairly consistently. Moore's Law has been in effect for quite some time, and there are people that say Moore's Law has actually failed, but other people disagree and say that it is still working, and I would agree with those people. Now, the desktop computers from the 70s and 80s that we were looking at a couple minutes ago continued to get smaller, faster, and more powerful over time, and eventually gave birth to the laptop computer. If you have a computer today, it's probably more likely that you have a laptop rather than one that has to stay plugged to the wall and stays on a desk all its entire life. Now, the laptops, in turn, continue to get smaller and faster and more powerful, and they eventually gave birth to the smartphone. Now, if you don't know that a smartphone is a computer, well, a smartphone has a central processor, it has memory, it has long-term storage, and it has the ability to communicate with other devices over the internet, and that makes it a computer. Now, if you happen to have an iPhone 15, you have a device that has about 16 billion transistors in it. Now take a look back at Moore's Law, the number of transistors. If you were to take that iPhone 15 with its 16 billion transistors and compare it to the computer I started this talk with, the ENIAC, that had 17,468 vacuum tubes, and you did the math to compare the two, you would find that you have in your pocket something that is 900,000 times more powerful than what was available to the United States Army 80 years ago. And that's the speed the computers move at. So I think that when we're talking about perspectives on computing in society, and we're looking at the newest and latest technologies, the newest and latest uses for computers, artificial intelligence, predicted uses for the computer in the near future, we would do well to keep in mind that the available computing power has never been static. The norm has actually been incredibly fast improvement. And I think we would also do well to fasten our seatbelts and hold on tight, because it's likely to be a wild ride. Thank you.